Welcome, everyone, to our Starseed Wisdom Council. And we are gathering here today with my friend and colleague, Erica Thibodeau. And I'm so grateful to have her come and step into our Earthseed Temple Arts community and share her gifts and her voice and her medicine in this council. And I met Erica in the fall of 2018 after having just enjoyed, been immersed in my first initiation in Egypt. And I was in the midst of a beautiful year-long training with Elder Malidoma Somé, and we had come together for an ancestralization. So Erica and I are very much intertwined through the medicine of Elder Malidoma Somé. And yeah, I'm going to welcome her into this space, let her voice be heard, and she'll also anchor us with a beautiful invocation. So thank you, Erica, for being here.
Thank you, RaMa. I'm so happy to be here with you and everybody who's watching or listening. Okay, I will lead right into the invocation so that we are anchored, and then we'll get started. So I'm just going to do an invocation that comes naturally to me based on who it is that I work with typically. So I call to you ancestors, all of our ancestors on our mother's side, going all the way back to the beginning, and all of our ancestors on our father's side, going all the way back to the beginning. Come now and circle around us. And I call to our ancestors in the animal world, and our ancestors in the plant world, and our ancestors in the fungal world, and our ancestors in the waters and the waters themselves. Our ancestor elders in the minerals and the minerals themselves. The Wedeme, the wild citizens of nature. And I call to the Contomble. And I call to the genies in our lineages that we know well, that our ancestors bring to us. And to the earth spirits of Tingan and Timbalu. And I ask you to circle around us and to open up a discussion that is medicine for us, all who are watching and listening, and for RaMa and I as well. And may we be held and nourished and nurtured and healed. Ashe.
Ashe. Beautiful.
All right. Where should we go from here? Is there anything? Should I just say a little about myself, perhaps?
Yeah, why don't you share a little bit about your work and how it manifests
Yeah.
in the world at this current time?
Yes. So I work as a licensed professional clinical counselor. I'm in Minnesota, and so in Minnesota, that's kind of the designation of a licensed counselor. Other states, it's like an LPC or an NPC. And what it looks like is I have a private practice. People come for hour-long sessions. It looks like private practice therapy. But what I was thinking about really sharing and deepening into and mentioned to RaMa at the start of this is I incorporate ritual, I incorporate so many unseen forces. And a lot of times people do come who have connections to beings that they see and maybe others don't, or they hear. They have connections to just so much beyond this linear plane of modernity. And they are afraid that they're crazy, or maybe at this juncture, they know they're not crazy, but they really don't know. They're struggling to be supported of holding the awareness of multiple realities in their life and still functioning. Um, and and I really find that often I'm just really holding a place, or having a space for them to be their true self. My personal like mantra that I remember creating a long time ago in my early 20s, and I've said it so many times and written it so many places, is that my purpose is to help people awaken to their true spirit. And it's manifested in so many different jobs and ways and roles, but that is often what's happening in here. And I will do ecotherapy. I'll take people. My office is located literally on the banks of the Mississippi River.
Mm.
um Mississippi is one of its original names. And we will just I have chairs that I like wheel out there, and in my little wagon, and we go down the embankment, and we literally go to the water. The session before this was right on the water. I poured milk, touched the water, asked for support for that session. So, and then sometimes I'll go into the backwaters of the Mississippi with people. So that's one of the things that's happening. But I would say in general, it's allowing clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, all of these senses to be present without the person being afraid that they are going to get a diagnosis
Mm.
that then involves deeply suppressive mood stabilizing medication, which is the go-to.
Mhm.
And there are times where I work with people who are taking medication. I mean, I don't have an opinion. I roll with their intuition, and
Mhm.
I support their intuition. And there's all sorts of things happening in this world, and I really keep my human egoic opinion out of it, and I just say, tell me more. Let's talk to that part of you. Let's listen to that part of you. I bring divination into the session if they're looking for that. More often than not, it's usually supporting people who have been on medication for a long time and will help in that unraveling process, which can be really terrifying.
Mhm.
And, emoting after you haven't emoted for many, many years, maybe since childhood, depending on when that began, can be really terrifying.
Mhm.
And you are going crazy. Like there's a concept of like, lose your mind and come to your senses, that
Mm.
I do embrace. But we have to balance being in the modern world and, you know, functioning and being able to take care of ourselves, because unfortunately we are so independent in modernity and in this country. And so helping them to walk the line of like, I know this is so hard for you. Can we help you adapt so you can live the life you want to live, even though it involves playing a game in modernity that maybe isn't one you would have chosen? There's a
Mhm.
lot of that, a lot of like crying over the dilemmas of it all.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. I love that. Not the not, I don't love the chaos that we go through in modernity, but I love just everything you touched on. And I didn't know that you were on the banks of the Mississippi. How do you say that? The Mrs. Can you say that?
There's several names, and actually I have them all written down in my home office, for this exact purpose.
Yeah.
Because there's several names of this place. But Mississippi. Like it
Uh-huh.
was, more with a Z sound is
Mississippi.
and it meant like I think it meant Father River or Great River, like it was
Mhm.
more of what, where its name came from.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so beautiful, like sitting with your the people who come to you in your community and being able to touch the water and give offerings to the water and give them that experience of attuning to these beautiful forces that support our lives that we're kind of desensitized to in modernity.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that medication absolutely can further that desensitization. It can suppress us. Um, so what, like as someone who's working as a counselor and really connecting with people in their vulnerability, when you think about the overarching themes you're working with in these times, I would say, like, we're recording this, it's late spring of 2023. So over the last 3 years, what are some of the overarching themes you've seen come to the surface? If there's been anything different or anything unique
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
that you could speak to, because I imagine it might resonate with those who are circling up to come into this council with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would say in general, an enormous shedding and emerging of themselves, an emerging of like a new birth, in so many different variations, whether that's shedding old identities or old conditioning, um, a real softness in that emerging, like a real soft, tender, vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because what people have the ways things have gotten rearranged in the last few years since 2020 and onward events, there's been like an opportunity for emergence of like when you scrape and destroy the soil,
Mm-hmm.
and there were ancient seeds waiting for an opportunity and then they've emerged. That's what it feels like.
Mm.
And um it kind of happened in my yard, and we just like stopped mowing because we had this like yard hill situation. We're like, why do we spend our life doing that, and let's just let it be wild. And I've lived in my home for 10 years, and during those 10 years I've had two pregnancies and two births. And in the second one, when he was so there was so much psychic info happening when he was in the womb. And when I would be out in the yard asking like, what do you want planted here? And this message came through of like, if you do nothing, everything you've ever needed will emerge. And I was like, okay, that seems like a big leap of faith on this like north facing woodland hill. But these medicinal plants and ephemerals and these, I mean, I've gotten to know them because I didn't really start out knowing much about this landscape here. And I just, that shifting of that 15-year cycle that we're in, that you could speak more to than me, but I really, some things that I like drew in my sketchbook in 2008 when I was living in West Africa, all of a sudden just happened in
Mm-hmm.
the last few months.
Mm.
And one of them is this seamless experience. So I have only been in this office for 1 year. And I didn't realize, like, I guess I kind of take for granted. I go to the river often. It's right here. Our little town sits on it. So
Mhm.
I go to it. But where my office is located, the train tracks in, because we're like a train, like we're a river train town. And I just hadn't walked behind this office building. I hadn't, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, I didn't realize. So I walk out there like 2 months ago, and I'm like, winter had ended. Wasn't icy. I'm like, I'm gonna go back here. And I turn and I'm like, what? Like, we're on the levee. Literally, it's like the building and then the levee. And I walk down. There's a bed of stones that the Army Corps of Engineers have put there for erosion, and there's the water. And that and like 10 other things have happened so seamlessly that I drew in my
Mm.
sketchbook while I was living, in West Africa. And out of the blue, like a phone call, it's like, someone bought this land. Do you want to help with this, this, and this? And I'm like, yeah, gosh. And I see that happening with people, just turning points and emergence of really precious newness that is more in alignment with who they've been trying and striving to be for
Mhm.
quite some time.
Wow. Yeah, when you're speaking about all of this and you said, you're talking about the soil, like scraping of the soil so that these ancient seeds could come forth. And then talking about your journals in 2008 in West Africa, like in Dagara land, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's making me think so much to, my brain works in this astrological way. So I'm thinking
Yes.
about like, okay, 2008 was when Pluto entered Capricorn. And right now, um, in this year of 2023, around the third week of March, Pluto entered into Aquarius. And then on the 1st of May of this year, Pluto went retrograde in Aquarius. And it's just like coming up in early June, Pluto retrograde will shift back into the late degrees of Capricorn. So there's like this, it's something I've been talking about in my podcasts in this year of
Mm-hmm.
2023 about um, we're in this really interesting kind of transitional time, but also there's a lot of sort of this folding and collapsing of time that I think for many of us can feel palpable during eclipses, but I think we're starting to feel it more and more even outside and beyond eclipses, just seeing how these threads connect us. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like something that you sketched almost 2 decades ago is now becoming your living reality.
And RaMa, so it's really funny. So it was so intense. I in March, I was like, okay, something really big must be happening astrologically
Mhm.
that is like from 15 years ago, because
Wow.
several things from this sketchbook
Yeah.
happened, right? Like that I had been striving for and then gave up on. And
Mhm.
like also, I had no clue that I was going to like go to grad school and become a therapist and all this stuff, right? I just knew the visions I was getting downloaded in the desert and drew them and longed for them. And so it was so much that I was like, I need to look this up. And so because you are kind of my go-to, I was actually like, okay, what is RaMa saying about this? I searched some things. I started to hear about the Pluto moving from Capricorn to Aquarius and this like back and forth. And this is making me want to know, was there like momentum? And it sounds like it, if there was a retrograde, then a stalling. And then because I will say, you asked about the last 3 years, but I will say just in the last couple of months, it's
Mhm.
like, and it's interesting, like the micro and the macro and like planetary versus the seasonal. And, there's just so many
Mhm.
lenses cosmological that
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm putting on new glasses like every few minutes sometimes in the
Yes,
office, you know?
totally.
And so it's interesting because it seemed like things were coming out with a force and then people's energy waned. Like excitement, like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
but it's also spring here in Minnesota, which we waited forever for this season, right? Winter is so long here. And so then
Yeah.
it's it's just interesting as I'm literally processing it, sitting here with you and thinking about it. Um, what I feel like the last 3 years has looked like is permission to do what feels important or necessary, whether that's go away or come out or be this way or be that way or try this new thing or try that new thing. It feels like there's been a shift. And in many ways, this like a turning point where it seems like there's a feeling of like, yeah, well, this is who I am, and I'm not, never mind, I'm not going back.
Mm-hmm.
And I just keep, as rocky as it's been to get to this place, I love, I love seeing someone just be more real.
Mm-hmm.
I even if I don't understand their way of being at all, I love when there's just it's almost like they look a little more translucent to me,
Mm-hmm.
and they like their eyes are a little clearer and their skin's a little like I don't know, they just look different, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, what is happening inside of you? And I love seeing that, and I do feel like there's been some kind of emerging. What about you?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I feel like that's a big question because I'm sitting with like what I've experienced on a personal level, and then what I see through the people who I work with, and then what I see beyond, which is like that collective reality. Because that is like part of my medicine being such a strong 12th house person is that I am sort of kind of always attuned to collective reality, even if I don't want
Mm,
to be, I can't really turn it off. Um, and I feel like, yeah, what I've experienced, I think emergence is a really good word. I think it's been a lot about um, people who took things for granted, just knowing that what we get to experience here on earth is so sacred and anything could be taken away from us at any given point. And so, what are we going to do about it to honor the
mm,
sanctity? And I think that while not many people may put it into those words, I think that's part of what encourages people to really step into a form of self empowerment and just being who they are and who they came here to be. Um, Yeah, and I've definitely witnessed that in a lot of the people that I work with is that people are making big shifts in their lives. They're ending relationships, they're ending jobs, they're moving, they're no longer staying in situations where they feel suppressed or where they feel like they're doing things just to kind of appease whatever system it is that they think they're appeasing. And it's so
mhm.
interesting because it's like everything I'm sharing with you, I can like it's like I can hear Elder Maladoma kind of like just the many times we got to sit with him and just hear his own voice coming through as far as like you know yeah, I just think of like how much he would share, like, when you try to appease a system, how that's literal like suicide, essentially,
Mhm.
and just this kind of dethronement of the divine spirit. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your time in Dagra land and
Hmm.
just what that was like for you, what you learned, how long you were there. I think it could be really informative in this space.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for asking. Really quickly before I do that, I have had some big encounters internally with things that Elder Maladoma share that I'm like, oh, and that appreciation for life on earth has been very present,
Hmm.
very, very present for me. I mean, very, very present. And I just, yeah, okay, I'll say more about that in a second. But so I went to Daggerland through the Peace Corps, knowing nothing about Elder Maladoma or the Dagger or anything. I just was like a young person. I was like, I I got like I went through a breakup and I was like, I'm out of here. But really, it takes a long time to get into the Peace Corps. And so by the time I went, it was like a year and a half later, and I was like, just I was ready to leave our country, and this was one of the ways to do it, which I learned about later. It's not really something I believe in. I don't believe in international aid in the way that
Hmm.
it's that we could talk a whole lot about that. But just before I tell my story, I just will say, while in the Peace Corps, I realized that it wasn't something I agreed with, and I had a great dilemma because
Hmm.
I just didn't believe that I should be there. Um, teaching people to like wash their hands with soap and stuff. So, but I went through the Peace Corps, and when you go into a country, you're with your cohort and you stay for 2 months and you learn the language of the place you're going to be living, and you learn a job. So mine was water sanitation and health. And I learned Dagra because me and 3 other people were going to be placed in Dagra land. And um so that was my introduction into it. And I moved, and you live alone, and so it's quite isolating. But I already had a meditation practice, and in Louisiana, where I'm from, I had a female Lakota elder, Francine Straight Arrow, who had um you know taken me to Sweat Lodge and put me out on vision quest a couple times. I had some awareness of like right away. I was like, oh, this is maybe not a good idea to be here. This feels really uncomfortable. And then I came across this book, because there's all these old books that float around Peace Corps volunteers. And this book called John Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions. And it was the Lakota story. And I was kind of like I was reading this book and watching the people in my village and just seeing these overlays and experiencing some internal dilemmas. And in the first 6 months there, I lived there in 2007 and 2008. I like had this painful stripping of what I was taught in the modern world to be true.
Hmm.
And these were things that like maybe lots of people know, but I didn't. And it was things like, I don't know, I don't even know how to put them into words, but it was just basically like rules, like made up rules in modernity, safety rules, traffic rules, cleanliness rules, child rules. All of these rules were just like crashing down in this very somatically immersed way, because I was living there
Yeah.
in it alone, and not alone, because I made dear friends who are still dear to me today, who like helped me. And I was extremely dependent on the lovely people in my village to survive, because I had zero skills and was just like a liability. Like the whole time I was like, why am I here? I have like nothing to offer these people. This
Yeah,
is so confusing.
they probably had to take care of you on some level.
They on every level,
I
RaMa.
mean,
I
like
couldn't
I
get.
can't even imagine.
And like the mission of the Peace Corps is like its intent is really great. It's supposed to be cross country, like immersive sharing, like
Mhm.
cross-cultural sharing. But because we're just so deeply like colonized and in that we just have such a long history of it and it's in us, it's very hard to separate those things. So that just happens whether people intend it to or not, because the system is so entrenched. And but no, I was completely dependent on them, and I had like no skills, and they took really good care of me. And but it was really hard. It was like a whole coming undone of everything. And then I feel like after coming home, after being there for 14 months, there was a whole like decade and a half of coming back here. Like some of it I just don't know if
Mhm.
it just deeply changed me forever. And I don't even know how, because it's always kind of unfolding. Um, and so, and the reason I decided my time there was up was I was like, I was there over a year. I had this lovely person in my village who the hope is that they would take over the projects. A person who's from there would be in charge and you're not like doing much. And I
Mm.
was like, this has happened. These are his project. This is wonderful. And then some of the girls had taken over this um, project with young mothers. And I was like, this feels like the place you're supposed to get to. And if I stay longer, I'm going to cause like, it's just a problem. And everything in me said to leave. And I had to battle with that, listening to my intuition and this loud screaming voice inside of me, or not. And I ended up doing that. And I came home, had a really cool story of meeting my now husband, and we moved to Minnesota 9 short months after I returned home. And I sought out some Lakota friends in Minnesota because I was there in their land, and went to a sweat lodge, and an elder handed me a book, and it was Elder Maladoma's book. And I opened it up and was like, wait, this is a map of this tiny geographic location. And I was like, what is this book? Read his book. While I lived there, I was invited to rituals, but no one like told me what was happening or anything. I
Yeah.
was just there and I saw things, and I'm not even going to say I understand them now, but I got to see things, and they just include you. And I felt very included. And then later reading this book, I just cried and cried and cried because I was getting to get a deeper understanding of what I had lived through and who I had lived with. And yeah. So that was, I mean, there's so much I could say, but I guess I'll just pause there and like take a sip of my tea.
I'm taking a sip of water too. We'll take a sip together. I love that. Um, that thread of like this Lakota tradition and Dagara cosmology seems so important to your own journey and your own story. And that's really profound. And now you're living on Lakota land too.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
And you're like synthesizing some of these practices you've learned through the Dagra cosmology with the people you're working with on the Lakota land.
Yeah.
That's an amazing um, coming together, this like cross-cultural pollination that, we live in such tender times where we can think about colonization and cultural appropriation. And these are very serious topics and ones that there's still so much healing and education that needs to be done around them. And also, I believe that there's also a way to honor the various traditions that we're guided to, that we're immersed within, that we're educated within, and to synthesize them in ways that are respectful and aligned and can be of service too. So I love what you're doing and the way that you're working um, to honor the traditions that you've been able to open up to and that have allowed you to open and evolve in your own path.
Yes, Rama. I mean, you're speaking to so much right there. And I think like something that I just kind of always hold awareness with, and also what I feel like Elder Maladoma like helped us, is like he helped our medicine to emerge, and it was a while I had gone to two ancestralizations and done a lot of which is an ancestor ritual to honor your ancestors, and done a lot of kind of walking through the dark. Felt like I was holding a rope that had been severed, and I was like dragging it behind me in the dark, trying to find where it had been cut, to find the where it links up, with my ancestors. And eventually my own ancestral wisdom started to emerge, right? And all of these puzzle pieces started to come together with my French Cajun ancestors, my Scottish ancestors. And I think one of the dilemmas of our time is that when we have a severing, we need help with people who aren't severed to get back to ours, right? And to their bridges. I mean, they
Yeah.
are bridges. And Elder Maladoma was so helpful in like awakening the ancient seeds in us.
Yeah, absolutely. 1000%.
And just I feel like, because also, we have these relationships, like their cosmology, is fire, water, earth, nature, mineral.
Mhm.
And like we all carry these elements in us, but whether it's like the dagger cosmology woke me up, and I think probably everyone who's ever worked with him or in that cosmology woke up the wisdom of the origin in our bones and in our own lineages of the relationship to those elements and all of these beings. And you know one of the reasons I wanted to work with him is because I was working in a mental health agency where people were heavily medicated, and literally it looked like I was working with people behind like a thick suit,
Mhm.
like thicker than just the human suit, right? Like this foggy, thick prison. And deep inside of there, I could see like a little glimpse of a person, but they were really, really often sedated. And I had his book for a long time. This was like in 2015, and I didn't make my way till 2018 when I met you. So, but I read his book in 2009. In 2015, I remember sitting in the middle in my chair with a client, and I was so sad and overwhelmed and like forlorn. Like I didn't know how to help people like through this process, through
Mhm.
where they were stuck. And I knew they weren't crazy. And I knew it was like so upsetting what was happening here. And I felt so powerless. And I was like, Elder Maladoma, please. I didn't call him Elder Maladoma. I was like, Maladoma, I need your help. Okay. And like, I kind of like, the person left the office. I'm in a dingy basement with no windows and like just a gross room trying to help people heal. I'm a little sensitive to that stuff, but I was like working in this basement with no windows and just like, ah. And I got home and I was still breastfeeding my first child. And I remember laying there and I was like, just going to check my email. I'm just going to go to his website and see like maybe where he's going to be next. And he was coming to Minneapolis the next month. Got a divination with him right away. And I've pretty much called out to him ever since, like that.
Mhm.
Before I even knew him, just from reading his book, before I had ever worked with him. And I mean, literally in desperate times, I'm just like, we don't know the way, and his people still do have some
Yeah.
knowledge of the way. A way. There's not one way. A way to survive and
Yeah.
be human.
Yeah. And to have that otherworldly connection be alive and not be
Absolutely.
seen as something insane.
And the biggest thing, which I don't think it's conveyed enough unless I'm sitting with someone in the office who already, knows this, because I don't want to like freak people out, but really to know, this isn't who we are.
Yeah, this is actually more insane
Yes.
than anything else.
and and like I have so much compassion when it's like, yeah, of course, just you got to play the game. And like, even to my child the other day, he was telling me that painful words and hitting, like he's 10 and he got in a fight with his friend, and he was telling me that words and physical aren't different, Mom. They feel the same pain wise as if someone says a mean word
Yes.
or they hit. And I'm like, I hear you. I so agree with you. And so I was like, in this simulation that we're in right now,
Right.
and he like got it. I was like, in this simulation, we've agreed that hitting is illegal and that words aren't.
Yeah, you
And
can
so
say anything.
we have to live by this situation, right? And he's like, oh, okay, and I'm like always amazed how, tuned in those ancient being children are. But, to help people, really, I feel like a lot of times I'm holding an anchor to the fact that what the person thinks they are is not who they are,
Yeah.
but we've all agreed this is who they are. And oftentimes they don't necessarily know what I'm holding. And I think that's what Elder Maladoma held for me way before I could wake up to the fact that this is not like who I am.
Hmm.
And you talked about feeling so grateful and appreciating Earth. I think that awakening in people, when we really are like, oh, this is a job I'm on. I have a purpose. I'm here doing something. And it really makes me appreciate the water at that river and the trees and the birds that come and visit there and all the rocks that are there. And, just it is so temporary.
It's so temporary. And it is like we're so blessed that we have the support around us that we do. I mean, as of now, we still get to go outside and connect with the natural world. We're not like literally
Oh my gosh.
in like a cell like people who are in mental institutions are or in prisons. I mean, to be able to connect with the world of nature as this portal to those wild beings that remind us of the wildness that we come from. I
Mhm.
was, when you were speaking, something came up for me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about this. Um, After the ancestralization that we experienced in that late October of 2018, um, remember when it was like we'd been up all night and then we went outside and Elder Maladoma led that amazing invocation. Do you remember that?
I just got full body chills
Like
actually remembering. Yeah.
that moment is definitely in like one of the top 5 moments of my entire life. Like it was just wow. Like, and he was speaking in Dagara, and I'm curious for you, could you understand anything that was being said from the Dagara perspective?
Like sometimes words, I will totally, but the speed at which he spoke,
Yeah.
there was like, I would be like, oh, like, I would be like
Yeah.
that word. But also, so like, you'll recognize this in some of the words you and I know, but like, if you were to give a greeting, it's like fo gabe song, fo gabe song, and then fo ma be song. You're asking like, how's the house? How's your wife or your mother? And you see how it's like two word, two letter syllables,
Yeah.
like fo ga be song. There's another one in gachewa. It's like I go and come in gachewa, in gachewa. The thing is that those words get strung together to make it's such a poetic
Yeah.
language. And so it's like I would recognize things, but I wasn't sure if it was in the context that I understood that two letter word to be.
Yeah.
And then this is another thing that I love about I just don't even have words for it because English does not capture this. Um so for example, the word da could mean a few different things. And I still don't even know how to make those different things because it had to do with facial expressions and intonations that I could barely understand because
Yeah.
I'm so conditioned and like American. And but it was like, I remember my friend he's like, da. It's like, da could be like spirit, it could be beer, it could be the market.
Uh-huh.
And he was like trying to like tell me the different ways. And I was like, I know, I just don't have the mechanism to quite understand it. So, um, yeah, so I was always straining to listen to some
Yeah.
of that. And then, you know how we would get like he would painstakingly translate a rhythmic chant
hmm
into like the four syllable pentameter, and those I could pick out words.
Yeah.
I definitely, and I could gather the context because he had done the translating. I just bought a bunch of Dagra dictionaries. They don't have many. There's just like a few like handmade, they're really small handmade things online that I heard actually Elder Maladoma had a big part in
I'm
actually
sure. I'm sure he
writing
did.
the language down because he was one of the educated ones who um came back and still knew it, at least in his generation. But I was really hoping they had words that we used in ritual, but really I just wanted to have something to look at once in a while to just I love languages. I've been learning Gaelic to honor my Scottish ancestors and to resurrect a language that was like brutally taken from them. And
hmm
my grandmother, my mama Hazel, she is like who is like my OG ancestor who lived well and died well. And she's always been there, even before she was ancestralized. And she spoke Cajun French my whole life. And she was born in 1924 and she was spanked at school for speaking French. Like it was like,
Yeah.
that's my grandmother. I'm 43.
Yeah. It wasn't that
That
long
was
ago.
happening, I mean, right.
Yeah.
It's like the Lakota could not even do a sweat lodge until 1979 without
Yeah.
being like it being illegal. So I do not take for granted that I can like waltz into something like that. But with the languages, um, I just feel like it rearranges us to speak non-English, even just to speak languages that our ancestors spoke or that have been lost. And so
Yeah.
I love trying to at least learn them and hold them dear.
Yeah. Yeah. The frequency that can come through other languages. English is designed in a very particular way and really devoid of, like you were
Mhm.
talking about, in the Dagra, the facial expression and the intonation. Um, there's so much that we've lost through this anglicized English that is now one of the largest spoken languages on the planet. And it makes me think about when Malidoma was wishing to be initiated in his village, after he had escaped being literally kidnapped by the Jesuits, um, and how his elders didn't want to initiate him because he had learned to read and write. And so they thought he was corrupt in the way that he couldn't handle the frequency. And it makes so much sense if you know that intonation and facial expression are so important, because when you get so kind of head down and consumed, you're not really present to the intonation and to the various ways we can express ourselves. And that's something I'm thinking about a lot these days, is like we're using technology more and more. And years ago, actually, when you were in Dagra land, I was a birth and postpartum doula, and like watching all these women give birth. And that was a time where there was less hand washing and more just straight sanitizer, and less touching of the pregnant woman, and more just like taking notes and typing things into a system, and not really like smelling or looking at the person or feeling their skin to see how they feel. It's like what you're talking about, when people are in their authenticity, there's more of a glow and there's more of a resonance that comes through. And in our medical system, we're really seeing how doctors and nurses are interacting less with humans. And if we think about how much we scroll and how so many people don't even know how to write anymore, we're like, our ability to sense reality through all of our senses is really shifting, So we just
Mm-hmm.
like live at such a fascinating time here on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Rama. I'm partnered with a writing professor, poet, and we talk about this all the time. And I I think there's just so many dilemmas in what you just mentioned. And I feel like I often live in the dilemma. Like sometimes my work is like to be swimming in a dilemma with someone and just, while they cry and about the situation. And when my children went to school and were like learning to read and read particularly, I remember just feeling deeply sad, just deeply sad. And also choosing not to like handicap them in America, like they have to read. And also like I just that dilemma. I think like one of the things I kind of I'm sensing as we're starting to have to wrap up, one of the things that as a therapist I am always encouraging people to do is to make space for the dilemma to express itself, which is so often in tears, right?
Mhm.
And if we can't physically have tears, because it's hard when we've been taught to just function. Many of the most functional people that come in my door, they are so good at functioning and they are not great at breaking down and
Mhm.
emoting. And that I just encourage them to get into that place where they can be like like make a crying face and like make a sound
Mhm.
and go through that, like give themselves the space to do that, because on the other side of it is this peaceful emptiness that allows something else to enter them. And to wrap it up with like a language. So the Dagra, I did learn uh Kung Popialong, which is happiness has entered me. That's how they say it.
Mm.
And I never forgot that one because I just Kung Popialong.
Kung Popi
Happy
Lung.
Popia Lung. Yeah, I think it's like I'm like it's there's a few in their alphabetic sounds that we don't have, the
Mhm. Oh,
tung,
Kung,
tung, Popia Lung,
Kung.
Popia Lung, um, with that tongue twist. But anyway,
Mhm.
um, that, it's like once that experience of the thing that's happening, it kind of moves out, then the next thing can move in
Mhm.
a different experience. And yeah, and that's how they view it, is like they'll say sickness has entered me or happiness has entered me, rather than I am
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
And I always found that fascinating, and I wish I'd had more time to ask him more about that.
Yeah. I think that's so profound because when we say I am sick, that's like a declaration. And why would you want to declare that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
our natural state of being is not one of that. We're really, I believe we're meant to be here to thrive. And there are times where our body needs more rest and we need to slow down. However, to like when we say I am, we are magnetizing more of that frequency into the very cells of our being. So I love this concept of happiness has entered
Mm-hmm.
me. That's so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. I thank you
Mm.
so much for sharing some of what you experienced in Dagra land and what you are kind of up to with the people you connect with in these times, and bringing your voice and your medicine into this council. And is there anything that you feel called to just leave in closure around supporting people as they're navigating all the different waves we're going through in these times? Anything that you think could be beneficial?
Yes, let me let the words come. Um, Holding many truths at once.
Mm,
So so how many truths can you hold at once? How many awarenesses can you hold at once? I would say it's been the biggest healing force when
mm,
I'm sitting with a couple. I'm like, I see that person's truth and I see that person's truth. When
mm,
I'm sitting in my office and there is a bird outside that does not know that that building has people inside it, that doesn't know it's a building, I feel like what the beings that live inside the mountain bluff behind my house
mhm,
that can see me, but I'm still in this human thing. And I know they're there because I've had like beautiful communication through this water spring, right? And I'm like, I just love that. And
mm,
I see it heal people constantly. Oh, your child was diagnosed with ADHD because that's what we call it. That's what we call something.
mhm.
But let's talk about all these other things at the same time. What is the whole? Let's look at this bigger circle here and all these truths and all these possibilities. And like the truth is, those symptoms are labeled that in the world, and that's a thing people have named. And if we deny it, we cause some problems, right? We like looking at how many truths can you hold
Yeah.
about yourself, about others, about the world, about the galaxy, about it all, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so healing for the times we live in because there's been, especially I would say since 2020, so much polarity and polarization, and people feel like, there are a lot of people out there that feel very adamant about certain belief systems, whether it's regarding health or politics or money or culture and who has the right to share whatever, and so just this ability to hold many truths at once is, I believe, such an important medicine for these times. So thank you for bringing
Mm.
that into our circle, and may we all learn how to really be that, because that is part of our true like multi-dimensional nature. And I think that that is something that will be coming online more and more for all of us. And uh, it's possible. It's possible to hold many simultaneously.
Yes.
Thank you,
Oh, thank you, Rama.
Erica, for being a part of this council and for all of the beautiful work you do in the world and all of the people who you serve and help bring them closer to ritual and to the elements and to their true self. So thank
Mm,
you.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you for all you do as well.
Oh, thank you.